We're joined now by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Governor, good to see you. Great of you to be here. A lot to get to, including mask wearing in schools. The American Academy of Pediatrics is suggesting that kids as young as 2 years old should be masked up when they go back to school in the fall. What do you plan to tell people in your state?
Well, first, the setup, and that is what you all have been talking about the past few minutes, and that is all the information that we get from Washington, D.C. and the supposed leaders about responding to COVID have been, as John talked about earlier, shifting. They keep moving the goalpost throughout the entire pandemic, and all that really does is sow confusion among the American public. No one knows what to believe, and as a result, people have a lack of trust and confidence in the information coming out of Washington, D.C. The one thing that we do know is this, and that is that those who receive COVID vaccine shots are far less likely and highly protected against, far less likely to get COVID and highly protected against COVID. And so the state of Texas is working with local communities to make sure that people are have access to COVID shots and are aware of the success rate of COVID shots. With regard to schools in particular, listen, I've made it very clear, this is an issue of parental choice and will not be an issue of mandates, especially for those who've already received a COVID shot. There's absolutely no proven reason for them to be required to wear a mask, for one, but for another, again, there will be no mandates in Texas schools about wearing masks. But as always, the people who are most responsible for the health of their children are the parents, and the parents have the right to make sure that they will get to make the choice about whether or not their child will be wearing a mask in school.
It seems that there's so much more thought put into just that aspect of things and not what happens to these kids if they do have to wear a mask all day, if that takes away from their socialization, their ability to learn, heading into multiple years of this. I saw sort of a reaction to the Rand Paul, Dr. Fauci exchange that we played there at the top of the hour. There was more that came from all this, including this exchange with Dr. Fauci and the CDC director, Walensky, and it pertained to exactly what we're talking about right now, wearing masks in schools in the fall. Listen.
It is my priority to get our children back to school for safe in-person learning. We continue to recommend that schools implement layered prevention strategies to protect those who are not fully vaccinated and encourage vaccination for those who are eligible. Masks continue to be a critical part.
You know, I'll get your reaction to that while I put this headline up on the screen. Dr. Marty McCary, a Wall Street Journal editorial, saying the flimsy evidence behind the CDC's push to vaccinate children, the agency overcounts COVID hospitalizations and deaths and won't consider if one shot is sufficient. This is important to point out because he is saying that they need to make more informed policy decisions when it comes to government officials. He says they're working with nearly 30,000 employees at the CDC, but they're working off incomplete or flawed data. Why is there not an effort to have more data behind these decisions rather than just throwing stuff out there sometimes that has to either be taken back or changed so quickly?
You know, from the beginning of the response to the pandemic to what you're talking about today, the approach has been ready, fire, aim. And they shoot before they really know exactly what they're talking about, and then they have to go back and retract what they've said before and redo it. And again, this is why the American public is losing trust and confidence with regard to the recommendations coming out of Washington, D.C. And that, Sandra, is one of the reasons why there is some level of vaccine hesitancy, because the public doesn't trust what's going on with regard to whether it be the vaccines or the recommendations. Yeah. And as a result, it is going to be a requirement that it's going to be decisions made by parents that are in the best interest of their family as well as their kids.
Okay, I want to move on to these Texas Democrats who fled your state. But before I do, so no change to mask mandate for your state as of now, neither for
Correct.
The public or the schools. Okay, so these Texas Democrats, a 6-1 now, has tested positive for the coronavirus, Governor. The clock is ticking. Are they going to run out the clock here? What happens next as far as the sweeping election bill back at home? What is your next step as they're still there?
Well, first, you can obviously tell what the Democrats have done is a disaster of a trip up to Washington, D.C. that has accomplished absolutely nothing. And while at the same time, think about this, they have abandoned their job, abandoned their responsibility to engage in the debate to try to shape this election integrity bill. While they were gone in Washington, D.C., the Texas Senate did pass out an election integrity bill. And I have to emphasize this, the Democrats who remain in Texas working in the Texas Senate, they were able to work to make amendments to that bill that would be more to their liking. That is exactly what the Texas House Democrats could have done had they remained in Austin, Texas, as opposed to wasting their time in Washington, D.C. Because they abandoned their responsibility, when they get back to Texas, I will be calling another special session and put this back on the agenda, as well as so many other items that are so important to their constituents. Their constituents are getting mighty upset about the fact that their House member is not in the state of Texas doing the job they were elected to do.
And now a completely different story with them contracting the virus and showing up at the White House and having access to Nancy Pelosi and others on Capitol Hill. And now a staffer of Nancy Pelosi's has tested positive, and a staffer at the White House. I want to ask you about the border crisis. We have seen the numbers, Governor. They are staggering. We've seen the images of these migrants flowing over our southern border. Brand new numbers out show that that is still at a record high. Obviously, coronavirus also playing a part here, as we are now learning a large percentage of those migrants are now reporting that they do and are carrying coronavirus over the southern border. What are you doing about a wall? Can you really build one?
We can, and I will mention that, but let me first touch upon the last thing that you said, and that is, as we're speaking, the president is considering lifting Title 42 that President Trump put in place, which was to prevent people coming into Texas from Mexico or coming into the United States from Mexico because of the COVID situation. It is going to be a disastrous political and policy decision if the president lifts that. The president bears personal responsibility for every single American who gets sick or contracts COVID because of people coming across the border, and he needs to be called out on being so reckless in considering lifting Title 42. With regard to your other point, listen, we've already begun the process of building the border wall as well as adding barriers. With regard to building the border wall, we're in the process of hiring a project manager. We are already receiving offers and information from those who've already been involved in building the border wall, showing the ways that we're going to be able to build it. We've already made an allocation of funding by the state legislature. We will be adding to that allocation of funding to make sure that we're able to build the border wall. But I must add this, there is a need that will be provided for far greater number of additional personnel on the ground, because Texas is changing the model real quick, Sandra, and that is we're not doing catch and release anymore. The state of Texas is working with local officials. We're going to be arresting people coming across the border, and we will be putting them in jail. They will not be getting the red carpet treatment they've been getting under the Biden administration.
I have to leave it there, Governor. Please check back in with us. Appreciate you giving us the time.
Thank you, Sandra.